Alrighty. Good evening. Thank you for making time this evening to listen to our compensation and classification study results. We have our representative from McGrath Consultants here tonight. Milena Halverson-Mays is right here sitting behind us, who will be giving the presentation. Milena was our consultant and key contact through this endeavor. She, I'd like to thank her. I can't look at her to tell her thank you, but she's a wealth of knowledge and has been doing this for many, many years. The entire McGrath team, because I'm sure she has a team behind her. If not, she's incredibly amazing. She's still incredibly amazing. For her patience and her diligence through this process, we had a shift in leadership, a transition in leadership through the process, and I know that that delayed the process a bit as well, so I'd like to thank her for her patience. McGrath Consultants have provided us what I would say is data-driven results and a framework that will help us ensure that we are fairly and competitively compensating our employees, and also ensure that our compensation aligns with our strategic plan and our mission, our vision, and our values. I'd also like to thank, I know Ms. Robertson is not here, but Trinice Robertson was our HR director prior to Megan Kirshner. She started this process, and in case she's watching, thank you, Trinice, for heading this up at the beginning. I'd also like to thank, of course, Megan Kirshner, who is our new HR director and heading up the department. She jumped right in and had to kind of pick up some pieces because we did have some hiccups, and so I know that that required a lot of patience too, and a lot of resilience, and a lot of long nights and weekends. So thank you, Megan, so much. I'd also like to thank the entire leadership team for their patience and their feedback. I know that this tonight is just the kickoff of this study. And when I say that, the hard work is ahead of us. We need to implement it. There are recommendations in the report that still need to be looked at, and that will be done in a very inclusive and democratic way with our leadership team. We're going to kick that off next week. So the majority of the presentation will be given by Milena. Milena will defer to our finance director, who will talk about the cost ramifications of going one way or another. Also, shout out to our finance director, who ran a bazillion numbers in the middle of budget to try and get us an understanding of what the budget impact is to us if we want one way or another. So. I will be quiet, and I will turn it over to Milena unless you have any questions. Okay. All right, Milena, floor is yours.
Good evening. My name is Milena Halverson-Mays with McGrath Human Resources Group. And I, too, would like to thank the Commission for the opportunity to be here in person. There's a lot to be said about projects where you get to come into the community that you're serving and you have a better understanding of programs and operations and services. But also, you have a wonderful administration team. They were an absolute joy to work with. And your department directors, they were very, they gave very thoughtful information, sometimes very passionate information in the study. And as Daniela has talked about, this was a very data-driven process. And so I appreciate not only the department directors' information, but we also introduced an opportunity for the employees to provide us information as well. We will talk about that when I talk through our methodology. And so this gets all the way into the employees, and it really was a great project. So my background is in human resources. I'm an HR practitioner by trade. I have about 20 years worth of experience in that, 15 of which was at the public level before I started working with McGrath. And I've been with McGrath now for 12 years. I have done hundreds of studies that are very similar to the city of Newton, and I do service clients all across the United States. I do a fair amount of work in Kansas, and so I spend a lot of time here in the Wichita area along with the Kansas City area as well, and it's always an absolute pleasure to come into this area. So I do have a PowerPoint presentation, and what I'm going to do, that PowerPoint presentation is driven, or it's intended to walk you through the final report. You would have received here a little bit ago a very large final report. We're just going to walk through the highlights for you so that you have a big picture understanding of the recommendations. And if you have questions along the way, I would certainly like to entertain those. Sometimes it's easier to talk about them in the moment than when we're waiting until the end, but I will let you make that determination. So I think we first need to start out with what did we do? And we looked at not only your classification system, but also your compensation system. And that's really two different systems that are combined together. So your compensation system is the method in which we put a specific financial value to the responsibilities that you hire your employees into. That's your structure, okay? In that as well is going to be your classifications. And the classifications are the schedule of your job titles that you have within the organization. It establishes the hierarchy that might be happening within an organization. And we define that by the skills that are required for the position, the essential functions, the education, the experience, those types of requirements. We don't focus on the person. And that is going to be, that is a topic that I'm going to be talking with your employees about tomorrow as well, because if you saw on the face sheet that the commission here is this evening, this exact presentation is going to be given to the employees tomorrow morning. And I know that compensation is very personal to the employees. This process, though, removes that. We are looking at the data, we're looking at the information that was provided to us on the positions, and sometimes that feels like there's a little bit of a dichotomy there where it's very personal to your employees. And I just want to acknowledge that we understand that our outcomes and our recommendations may not necessarily come with a 100% agreement from your employees. And we know that, we understand that, and we accept that. But we go through our process so that we explain to you as the body that makes the decisions. We explain to you how we came up with those recommendations to allow you to make a determination on which way we want to go as soon as we get to that point. With that in mind, let's talk about what's been happening in the world of compensation for the last 5 years, because a lot has been going on. And what you have before you is a stair step that really does try to explain what you have been experiencing as an employer for the last 5 years. And we actually, we pay attention to demographic information in the public sector. We started noticing even before COVID that we were starting to see a lot of individuals leaving the public sector, and this is nationwide. This is not necessarily specific to the city of Newton. We know that within the past couple of years in the public sector nationwide, 1/3 of employees, public sector employees, are age eligible to retire out of their state retirement system. One of the challenges that public sector is having is being able to backfill those positions with qualified personnel. We're calling that the silver tsunami. You've heard about it in the public and the private sector, I am sure. Then you had the pandemic. And so that further challenged employers, because suddenly how you are working with your employees kind of changed really the landscape. And employees decided, I'm either in or I'm out. And we had a lot of individuals who just simply decided to leave the workforce. And then you have to try to backfill those positions as well. And at the same time, there was a pretty big financial boost that went into the economy, and private sector absolutely took off. And there are some areas where it always has been that way. It's been that way for a number of years, even before the pandemic. And when that happened, then again, public sector is having what we're calling this great resignation. They're being poached away. There's a lot of opportunities. They have a lot of choice. And if you're going to take a qualified person to take your position, you're going to do that. And so we found that on top of all of this, you've got individuals that are leaving their position, not necessarily just because of retirement. And on top of that here, in about the last year or so, we all understand the inflationary effect. And all of a sudden, the value of the dollars for the employees, it stopped stretching quite like it used to. And employees are suddenly saying, I don't necessarily want to go, but I can't afford to stay. And so all of these factors are compounding one on top of another. So as I talk with elected bodies here over, the last 18 to 24 months, a very common thread that I hear is, why is it that it seems like we're trying to do, but we can never get ahead, especially when we start talking about your market data. This is why. This is what's happening. You have, the cards are almost stacked against the public sector. In addition, then, we have what's called a quiet crisis, and that is because you have individuals that are leaving the public sector and you're struggling being able to backfill those. Now, in the last, I would say, year or so, we are hearing that organizations are having a better time to be able to re-recruit, but it is coming at a cost, and that cost is that we are, when I say we, the public employers, they are starting to change what their minimum qualifications are. They are starting to say, we're going to accept something different. And what that does, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, what that does is it opens up the door for a pathway. So you might be bringing in an inexperienced person, but then you have to grow and develop them. You need to have the financial resources to be able to provide them that training, and that you want them to stay, because the worst thing that you can do as an organization is to bring inexperienced people in, train them, and then watch them go, because what you're doing is you're favoring all of the other communities around you that are robbing and poaching your employers instead of helping yourself. So there is, there's we call it the fragile future. We see that things are starting to settle out a little bit, but it cannot go ignored. There needs to be a lot of attention put onto this particular topic over the next several years. And before we get into your study, I do want to just talk a little bit about what's happening, not on a national front, because that's what I just described, but what's happening more at a local level for you. So what I did was I took all of your employees and I charted them on these two demographic charts, and these are going to be in your report. What I've done here for you is I've explained to you the age of your employees and how long they have been working for you, because there is an absolute generational difference that's happening within your workforce right now and how long individuals are staying in their position. So your average tenure to the city is 8.4 years, and nationally that number is 6.4 years. And what that means for you is that you are holding on to your folks longer than the national average, which you should be applauded for. That's a very good sign. But we do have to take a look at, a little bit more in the details of your demographics. On a national level, just so you know, we know that 10-year number is going down. We've been watching that, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, they do a number every other year, and this is local government only. This excludes state, it excludes teachers, and it excludes the private sector. We know from your age demographics that you have 14% of your employees that are age 55 and over. And what that means then is that within the next decade, you know that if nothing else were to happen, you're going to likely lose that 14%, because they're going to become age qualifier and they want to go be able to start the rest of, the next chapter of their life. They earned that right to be able to do that. We know then that the city of Newton, you're going to end up having to backfill those positions somehow. Okay, now that's not a real high number, to be honest. We sometimes will come into organizations and see upwards of about a third of the workforce, which tells me either you have passed that bubble, or it's maybe your demographics just don't necessarily align with the national average. But the other important part of all of this is what's happening on the left side of the charts, and that is our more mobile workforce. This is the individuals who are under the age of 40. They are, they're mobile. They are not necessarily dedicated to the organization. They're not necessarily looking at coming into a place and saying that I'm going to be here for my 30 years. If $1 an hour or $2 an hour in the community next door is what's being paid for a position that is commensurate with their skills, they're going to be more than likely to want to seek something like that out than they will be to stay. So you have 50% of your workforce in that category. And that is the category that we want to really focus on trying to retain, because a competitive compensation system is going to help you when you re-recruit. But we also want it to be able to retain the current employees that you have. Because as you are continuing to provide training and education and professional development, you want it to be able to stay within the organization long-term so that you get a positive return on investment. I don't want to forget about the middle generation, and that includes me, because even though I might be over the age of 40, and you do have the 40-somethings and the 50-somethings that are aware that they're very skilled, they've been in their profession for a good number of years, and that is the group of people that are being poached. And that's because people want to hire in individuals who are already experienced and that they don't necessarily have to spend a lot of time training. So everyone is up for grabs. Now, how does that compare against your turnover rates? And I asked for human resources to provide me with some information, and this is really kind of interesting. So we went back about 3 years, and you are, when we compare your resignations to your retirements, and your other would be discharge, or it could be if someone passes away, something of that nature. What's happening? And this is really interesting. You haven't lost a lot of people to retirement in the last few years. About 14% of your turnover has been due to retirement. 62% is resignation. Okay, that's an important piece. That means that they're coming in the door, but they're not staying in the door, especially when we look at the years of service that your employees had on average when they're leaving. They have less than 6 years of service. So you might have some long-term employees that are helping keep that average up, but I think that you have somewhat of a revolving door with some of the individuals that haven't been here for a very long time. And again, when we're thinking about you have finite resources, make sure that you're putting it in the correct spot with that development and training opportunity, and you want to be able to keep that within your organization. So your overall turnover rates aren't the worst that I've ever seen. You've got somewhere between 13 to 16%. Certainly anything over 20% is alarming. We like to see things under 10. So you're a little bit in between. It's probably worthy of noodling into a little bit more to see, are there any specific departments that you're being challenged with, anything of that nature. But I do recommend that the organization, and this goes to your administration and to your department directors, to do stay interviews, because I think you want to know why it is that your employees have not left you. And that really does tell a lot of why are your employees choosing to stay. And the more that you can understand that and be, even maybe a little bit more proactive, the better it's going to be to your organization long term. The other part of this, before we get into the methodology, is really probably the most important policy question that's going to come out of this project, and that is going to be an item that we're going to talk about here with the Commission in a couple of slides, and that is your compensation philosophy, otherwise known as your compensation strategy. And it is where do we put the pin in the market to say this is where Newton is aligning within that comparable market. Organizations have basically 3 options. You can say that I want to be a leader in the market. Do you have the financial ability to do that? Do you have your constituents who are accepting of that on an annual basis with your budget? You have the ability to meet the average market, and that is where a lot of organizations are at. They want to be average, and they can't necessarily afford to do much more. But then there are organizations that they lag in the market, and those organizations are going to be those that you're going to put a little bit more into your recruitment resources because you're going to have a little bit more high turnover, okay? So those are your three options. So when we started looking at your organization and started doing our market analysis, we studied 4 different areas. We looked at the 50th percentile, which is average, the 60th, the 70th, and we also looked at the 85th. And what that means then is, and I'm just going to use as an example, the 60th percentile is one that we're going to talk about here this evening. What does that mean? That means that within our data set, we are trying to position Newton at or more competitive than 60% of the communities that are on your comparables list, trying to give you a little bit of an edge over that average, but not necessarily to be the highest in the market. When you look at the data here this evening, you're gonna say, Milena, it feels like, or it sounds like you're talking out of both sides of your mouth with the market data, and I will be, and that is because our findings, we look at the findings and our recommendations, and then I have to look at your turnover rates and whatnot, and I think there's worthy of a conversation there of, is the 60th percentile going to work for your organization long term? If we were to consider the 70th percentile, it's going to put you in a better competitive area against your competitors, but it comes at a cost. And that is what your finance director is going to talk to you about here in a little bit. All right. So just a little bit more about your compensation philosophy, and yeah, and I think actually I sometimes I talk ahead of my slides, so I'm probably just going to skip over this one. I will say that we did do a little bit of research into what your historical compensation philosophy was, and what we found in the last study that you did, your consultant group actually they utilize the Kansas City and the Wichita and the local market, and so you know, if we were to consider what you've done historically, I think that we just have to be cognizant of that your market that you used in the previous study differs from the market that we used in this study. With that said, let's talk about your study and the methodology that we utilized. We first had interviews with your administration, your HR team, and then we met with all of your department directors. We do that at the onset of the study to understand programs, operations, services at a real high level, but then also what are their positions and what are they responsible to do, so that we had an understanding while we were going out to the market to collect that market data. We also reviewed your compensation system, your policies. We took a look at your benefit information, your job descriptions, anything that the city was able to give us to get a better understanding of how you are handling your compensation at this point. And then during those meetings, we identified positions that needed to complete what was called a position questionnaire that gives us more information about the responsibilities of the position, and that helps us also be able to place positions into the new structure in the future. So we utilize the information that the employees gave us, reviewed by their managers in this process. We went out to the market, we collected multiple data points. This is important because we collect the minimum, the midpoint, and the maximum to understand what the total salary ranges are from your comparable organizations, but then we also collected what we call incumbent rates. Those incumbent rates sometimes might deviate from the range, and that's because that's a more accurate reflection of what's actually happening in the market. And an example of this is something that we see a lot more lately, and that is we might have a salary range for an engineer, a PE, but we're noticing everyone is paid really high on their range. That would be an indication that maybe that there's some stressors that are happening within an industry. Organizations are pushing those wages up, and so the ranges that we see just may not be strong enough for when we rebuild your model. So that fourth data point is really very important for us. When we were done building the model, then I met with your administration, and I also came back on site and I met with all of your department directors to give them an opportunity to see what it was that I was going to be recommending in draft form, and gave them an opportunity to give me feedback. And feedback I received. I appreciate that. We had a lot of very good conversations about what the impacts of this were going to be on their departments. This is in your final report, and so I apologize that it's really small to read. It will be a table in there, and this is the comparable organizations that we used to create the market for the city of Newton. And when you look at it, you're going to see that it is very, for the most part, it's very narrowly focused into your region. There are a couple of outliers, just given some specific areas that are a little bit more of a specialty niche, so we had to go out a little bit further. But we are talking the local and the Wichita market for the most part. Okay? All right. And with that, then what were our findings? And what we're going to talk about here is what we call our market analysis. We put all of this data into what's called a comp ratio. A comp ratio is a comparison ratio between where the city of Newton is against all of those other comparators. And we do that for each of those data points that we collected for each of the positions that we are able to benchmark. And we try to benchmark 100% of the positions whenever there's salary data to do that. Now, when I talk about the average market, just so you know it, the numbers that you're going to see here are against the 60th percentile. Okay, and that is because because that is where I landed on my recommendation. So I wanted you to see how you're doing in comparisons to the 60th. Okay, when you look at this, I've color coded it. Blue means you're good. You're within the market. I do believe white is going to be what we call at risk. They're on the cusp, but very close to being market. We would consider them market competitive, but we have to look at them very carefully. And then the orange area that you're going to see means that they're too far under the market to be competitive, okay? So with that, let's take a look at what your minimums are telling you. This is your step one in comparisons to the market minimums. And now, this is kind of interesting. So this is where for the next couple of slides, and I'll come back and I'm going to summarize this at the end. What we found is that 53% of your positions at the minimum are aligning to the 60th percentile. You have 16% that are at risk. So we consider them competitive, but if you don't do something with those ranges in the next year or so, they're probably going to fall behind. And then you've got about 30% that are under. Okay, so that's just the minimum. This would be a reason why in some positions they're not hiring at the minimum. They're asking to be able to hire up at a higher rate of pay, and that's because we do have about a third of them that are struggling against your external market. Now we look at trends. This is what your midpoint looks like. So this is your step 8 of 15. 50% are aligned. And I'm sorry, this won't total 100% always through rounding factor. But 50% is aligned, you've got another 15% at risk, and you've got about a quarter of them that are under the market. Okay, and this is your maximum, where we have about 57% that are aligned at the market. So the takeaway of this is, at the 60th percentile, at about half of your positions are already aligning to the average market. Now what that means then is when you see the recommendations, you're going to see that some of the positions did not have a sizable move. And that is because the market does not demand that to happen. And that goes back to employees may take this very, very personally, but this is what the market is telling us. The 70th percentile looks a little bit differently, certainly. You're not going to be as strong in the 70th percentile if we have that conversation here this evening. But we do know that about half of your positions, they're doing okay at this time.
Can you go back to the last slide?
This one? Or the midpoint?
That one.
Okay.
So wouldn't there be 60% aligned with the market?
Do I have a typo? Yep, you're right, 60%. I kind of figured I wasn't quite at 100%, so we'll make that correction so that we have that on the noted for you. All right. Okay, this is where your incumbents fall. So what we did was we compared your actual employees and their rates of pay against their counterparts in those other organizations. And what we found here is that about 51% of your benchmarks have wages that are under your counterparts. It's kind of an interesting phenomenon. It might be because you've got some newer individuals in these positions and they just haven't been in your organization long enough to be able to progress up through your ranges. Just kind of an interesting outcome. Now, your current system, we took a look at that, and you have, when you look at your model, it's a step model. That means that the employees can look at that and anticipate what their salary increases are going to be, because that has been defined as a step value. Right now, there's 15 steps. That is a 3% value per step. I don't think it actually was always that way, but there was a change in your structure here in the last year or so that gives you a 51% spread. That's actually a little bit of a wide spread for a step program. We've seen it before, but most organizations, when you're going to do a step model, we normally would see it at 45% spread or less, and you have 17 unique pay ranges. Your separation of your ranges, it deviated. It was a little bit inconsistent. It ranged anywhere from about 0.5% up to 11%. We don't like to see salary ranges less than 5%, and actually right now the market really is dictating that separation between pay grades be more like 6 to 7% to help with compression and a true separation. If we're going to have a career laddering, how much do we have to have separation between those pay grades? The other thing that is interesting about not your structure, but your system is that you'd utilize your steps in some departments for certifications, and that's, it's a system, but not every department is utilizing it that way. So you've got a system in place, but it's being inconsistently applied in the organization. And I'm going to have a recommendation for you on that, on how to address that in the future. So it's a good model. It's an okay model. It just needs to be updated a little bit, and we need to realign your positions. So what we did for you was, even though it's going to look very similar, we restructured the system for you. Okay, we kept it as a step system. So it's going to look very similar to the employees, although there are a couple of differences that we'll talk about. The framework of the system is going to align with that external market, and the recommendations that we have here are at the 60th percentile. And in a couple of minutes, I'm going to ask for your team to hand out what those structures look like. In addition to that, though, there's a methodology that we use, and it goes back to the position questionnaires on how are positions placed onto the salary schedule. Because there's one thing to have the structure in place. It's something entirely different to be able to put the positions within each of the respective pay grades. We use 4 different factors for that. We use the external market, and that does hold some very heavy weight with how we place positions, because no matter what, I need to make sure that the market or the range that I'm giving you is going to align to the market so that you can be able to recruit positions, and we are hoping is going to be able to retain your current personnel. The position analysis played a factor in that. And then we also have internal, what we call internal comparability. Internal comparability is, for example, you might have an administrative assistant or multiple administrative assistants that are providing that administrative support across the organization, but in different departments. And if I were to survey what the market says about the differing administrative pieces, we might say that the market might deviate department to department ever so slightly. But as an organization, you want to make sure that for equity purposes, they're supporting the departments in much the same manner, same type of skill, same type of characteristics of position, so we want to align them in the same pay grade. That's what internal comparability is. And then the last piece is compression. Compression is the amount of separation that you need with your ranks. Now compression, there's a couple of different ways that you can look at compression. You can look at in-range compression, which we're going to talk about, but I'm talking about the structure of the career progression, the ones, the twos, the threes, or the ranks when you're talking about your public safety departments as well. So all 4 of those factors were used to place positions within each of their respective pay grades. I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this tomorrow with the employees because that's really what they're going to be curious about, probably more so than the commission is. But because this is the same presentation, I am going to talk with your employees a little bit more about position analysis and some of the details that we take a look at. And then also just to give employees an understanding that there's been some recommended changes in titles. So when they see this, they may not see their old title anymore, and that doesn't necessarily mean that anyone's losing their job or anything of that nature. It just simply means that we just changed their job title. We're going for some consistency. We're trying to take a look at what the industries are doing here for you, and that we might have some new levels, and we might have some levels that have gone away. And that's important because we want to make sure that whenever a level exists, that it's going to be able to be defined so that you can objectively defend it, okay? And if we can't objectively defend it, when I say we, I mean your human resources director and your legal counsel, then we probably should not have the levels. So overall, actually that would be a really great time, I think, to see the 60th and the 70th. This is not in your handout. Megan is going to be passing out 2 structures, and that is what our recommended system is. You're going to be receiving a single sheet on the 60th percentile, and you're also going to see it as the 70th percentile. The recommendation at this point up for discussion by the commission is the 60th percentile. Okay? The model has 21 pay grades. You had 17 before. We've given you a few more. Okay? It has between 7 and 10% separation between the pay grades to make sure that we have proper separation for compression. The value of the steps remains 3%. We did not feel that we did not want to change that on the employees. We wanted the value to stay the same. The city has been able to do 3% in the past. We wanted to continue that. But it is only 13 steps now. If we want to discuss a 14th or a 15th step, we certainly can do that. But what we've done is, and we've now compressed your range down to about 43%, which is on the top end of what we would recommend for a step program. We've anchored you to the market, okay? And when I say we've anchored you to the market, we've got a very specific number that we use that we are calling the market number, which is going to be applied to step E. And I didn't have that listed on my bullet points, but you're going to see that we don't have numbering. We don't have step numbers because a lot of times employees associate a number with years of service or years in position. And everyone's pathway to their position is just a little bit different through promotions. It might even be we were hired at a step 3, and so that number really doesn't mean a lot, but to employees sometimes it does. So we've moved it, we're migrating it over to letters. And we'll talk about longevity here in a little bit. So step E is then, or column, that E is where we're aligning you or anchoring you to the 60th percentile. But what my job as your consultant is to make sure is that anything from your step A up to your step, I believe it's L, maybe M, are all aligned to the average market. Okay. Now, you have employees or you have progression that sometimes occurs at 6 months where you have higher 6-month, 12-month, et cetera. This is not intended to disrupt that. The city can continue to utilize that program as you have. The 70th percentile document that you have is the structure only. And so at this point, we would expect that on the 60th percentile, job titles would remain. It's a matter of whether or not the commission desires to align yourselves to the 60th percentile, or if there's any discussion to align you to the 70th percentile. Okay. With that, there's a couple of other recommendations that we have. And the report it has a lot of recommendations, and my apologies, sometimes it's all throughout the document. Right now, like I said, you have some departments that are using steps for certification pay, but the reality is that your employees are going to progress through that range if they're here for that number of years, regardless if they have the certification or not. And so that really only works until you get yourself to that top step, and then everyone is the same again. My recommendation to the organization is to not utilize steps for the certifications, but instead to identify those certifications that are important and meaningful to the department, to the operations for the city. And that we open that up for all of the departments, not necessarily just a select few, because there may be some other certifications that were not included in the classifications process, but are still important to those departments. And then the city make a determination on how much additional compensation you're going to apply that certification above that base pay. We would recommend that you put a limit on that. It cannot be stacked and unlimited. We do need to make sure that that is limited, but to not utilize the step process in that manner. And the other area that is a primary financial conversation is your longevity program. So when we looked at your longevity, you have some varying numbers on an annual basis about how much you're giving your employees based upon their years of service. And we found that there was a little bit of a range. Some were in the ballpark of from a low of about $41, and I do believe that the high was close to about $60 per year, but it's inconsistent. And actually what happens in your program is the employees that have not been here or that have been here fewer years have a higher longevity amount per year than employees that have been here longer. So that breaking point is at 18 years. So if you've been here 18 years or greater, you're receiving less longevity on an annual basis than the folks that have been here 3 to 17 years. That doesn't really feel quite right. And so one of my recommendations is for the city to apply a set dollar per year across the board, and it's a quick multiplier, and that becomes your longevity pay. What you're going to see in the report is you're going to see a table. And that table shows if you were to hold longevity and pay longevity once every 5 years. I talked with administration about this. It is in the report. However, because the longevity is paid out currently on an annual basis here, the administration felt that that might be a little bit of a big, kind of a too big of a change for your employees. So I am open, and I am absolutely okay if the city wants to continue to do that annual longevity payment instead of holding it every 5 years. What the takeaway, though, is that we want to have a consistent value so that you're equitably applying the longevity. And we want that longevity to be a consistent in the benefits package for the employees. With that, let's talk about the implementation and what the plan is, or what the hopeful plan is based upon your feedback tonight. Implementation would occur on August 1st. There was a desire to try to get this in before the end of the year. And all employees would simply be placed at the step closest to what they are earning without taking a decrease. So no one has any kind of a cut in pay. So there's no financial loss. We do have a couple of employees that are in an over the maximum situation, which means that their rate of pay exceeds my recommended step 13. And what we do in those situations is we just tell the client to hold the wages the way they are and just give time for the schedule to be able to catch back up, because we will be recommending that you do a cost of living adjustment onto the model on a regular basis, so that within a couple of budget cycles, those employees then will fall right back into the range, and they will be able to receive that cost of living adjustment. In addition to that, in addition to simply getting the employees into the range, there is some consideration for in-range adjustments that I think is important, because even though we've got about half of your positions, and that means that you've got some employees that just really aren't going to be moving a whole lot, they were already in the range, we do have some minimums that are moving up. And what happens when that phenomenon is called in-range compression, it means that employees that have been here 10 years might be earning very similar to an employee who's been here 3 years. And sometimes that doesn't sit very well, and I can understand that feedback coming from the employees. So what we have done is buy a formula based upon the number of years that an employee has been in the position, to make sure that they're at a specific step in the model to provide some better separation. We don't want any employees to be in step A, because we want to open that up for new hires coming in. So no employees would be under step B, and then as you can see, we kind of band the number of years to make sure that they're no less than a specific step in the model. And we're not going to, that means that, you might have some people that are going to get moved all the way up to H. We left the top end a little bit open just for people to have some continued progression. And then, of course, we have the longevity, starting at 3 years, which I do believe is what you're doing right now, but making sure then the value of that on an annual basis is $50 per year instead of the inconsistency. So with that, we probably need to talk about how much this is going to cost, and the 60th percentile versus the 70th.
This is the fun part. I tried to put as few figures on here as possible so we can really just see the top figure and not get all confused. Just for starting this year, if we start August 1st, if we go at the 60th percentile, it'll be an additional $272,795. If we would go with the 70th percentile, it would be an additional $374,920. And if you remember, we put in the budget specifically for this purpose an amount of $398,495. So we are going to stay within that budget that you allowed for 2025. When we move on to the next year, I had already done an original 2026 payroll budget with a 2% COLA like we always have, and I came up with total payroll costs for the whole city, this is benefits included, of $25,322,691. If we go with the 60, if we decide to just go up on that COLA for 3% instead of the 2%, it would be an additional $205,000. But then if you want to go with the salary study and go with the 60th percentile, and this includes a 3% COLA, it would be an additional $578,000 over what we originally estimated. And then if you go with the 70th percentile, it's $1.3 million.
So just to clarify, the $578,000 would be in addition to the $398,495.
Yeah, $398,495 is just 2025.
I got you.
Yes.
And then an additional for 26.
Yes.
Okay.
And that includes COLA?
Yeah, 3% COLA. They're recommending a 3% COLA to stay with I don't want to say the environment, the economic factors.
Is that recommended, or is that what we selected? Because the report says to choose an economic variable
That's
to
what
watch.
they're yes.
So what is that based off of? Because we were basing it off of 2%. So.
Right. This is what they're recommending, the 3%.
Yeah, we're recommending the 3% for you going into next year. Based upon what we know of the market, the changes, you've got comp studies, you've got a comp study 20 minutes down the road.
Right.
You know, we know what's happening in the market. We feel that you need to stay strong right out of the gate and go with a 3% this next year. And then, yes, you are right, pick an economic indicator going forward, but this was actually my recommendation to the administration when we started running the costing.
And I just want to quickly mention, that doesn't mean we stay at 3%. We would reassess every year, and depending on the benchmark, I think we landed on CPI or CPIW, depending on, or maybe averaging both or taking a rolling average.
Right, which is why I was like, we're grabbing an arbitrary number for the first year and then,
No, they've done the homework for us this year.
yeah, it's a big bite.
Well, and, I mean, if we look at philosophically, down the road, I think all of us would like to be in the 70th percentile because we want to attract the best of the best, right? But man, when you look at a number like 1,390,000 for that jump for 26, that almost forces us to make a different decision. I don't like
What percentage of our positions are vacant? So this is total max, all positions filled exposure is what that number is.
Exactly, that's what we put in the budget.
I know, but where are we at?
Are you asking current positions open now?
I'm asking, what would those numbers be if
How many
every
people are
position
here?
that had a person in it right now still had a position in it in 2026, but none of the vacants were filled? What was that number?
I don't know that we calculated that number, but that's something we could calculate and bring to you at the next work session.
And
That would decrease that number.
And
Right.
what is that vacancy number?
Right.
Just by number? Is it 10, 20?
Megan could probably get that for us, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be a good number to know.
Right.
And just so you know, that's a point in time. I mean, what's open today, it's very cyclical. You know, 2 months from now, we may have 15 positions open, and then
Here-
that we may,
Right.
so just keep that in mind.
And another number that I would be curious about, Megan, is if you could look back over the last 5 years and look at a rolling average of what that vacancy number has been for the last 5 years, each year.
Both from a personnel count as well as from a delta in the budget. So we budgeted X amount of money
Yes.
for
That's
staff,
important.
Right, that,
and we spent X amount. What's the difference?
Sure.
Historically in a amount and in a percentage.
that delta is something we can definitely figure out. I want to make sure that I understand that the rolling average, if I'm understanding that correctly, would that be essentially our turnover rate over a period of time? Because our turnover rate last year was about 12%. So 12% of our positions, and we have how many positions?
240
So 13 divided by 240, what, that 12%, excuse me.
Are you looking for the churn, or
Are
are you
you-
looking for the average vacancy percentage
That.
left open?
The average vacancy rate left open per year.
Per job.
And I think it's easier to look at it from the dollar side because
yeah.
it is,
It's a point, yeah.
it's a point in
From when?
time,
December
but
It's a savings
snapshot is the savings.
will reduce the
And-
bottom
And I don't mean
number.
savings that way. It's just, if we're going to even try and get to any of these other numbers, it's going to have to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
And likely that is probably going to be a position or two that are not filled because,
We have 8 vacancies right now,
8 total.
8 total
Out of
across-
what'd you say, 240?
240.
that's good.
So it's not much money savings.
Yeah, that's 3.3%.
Do we pay?
But that could be, I want to make this clear, you know, our police department, I think, at one point in the last 12 months, lost 3 officers in a matter of 60 days. So
I know, you just don't,
You just don't know.
can't predict it, can
Yeah.
you?
And you sure,
It's
I
gonna happen.
would think you don't want to count on it.
Yeah.
Because we need every person,
Right.
you know, everybody's so overworked now. I would hate to say, oh, we're not going to fill 15 positions to save money. That's going to hurt.
Well, we have to figure out where it's going to come from too.
Yeah.
Since we're not paying those people, do we do we pay overtime that adds up to
Yes.
at
And a
least
lot of
as
times
much
we
as
do.
we're paying them? Yeah,
Especially in the fire and police, you would.
yeah.
Are there services that are not getting completed because those positions are vacant?
I would say if you talk to the Parks Department, there probably is. When they can't find their people they need, places aren't getting mowed like they should. Things aren't getting taken care of like they should. I mean, if we had too many people, we wouldn't hire, wouldn't need to fill those positions.
Well, nobody said you got too many people.
I know.
Well, with that news, all right. So this is the dilemma that that McGrath has been struggling with, along with from the get-go when we were talking about the market data, knowing that my presentation to you is that you've got positions that are well aligned, but we also see you've got a turnover rate. You are doing okay with your vacancies at this point, as Megan pointed out. But I also know that in your strategic plan, I mean, this project was a project that you identified because you want to be able to have exceptional public service, and that it's important to you to make sure that you are compensating your employees at a competitive wage. So for us, it's really been the balance of I'm pleased to be able to present 60th percentile to you. I would love for you to be able to consider the 70th percentile. I recognize that that might not be an option this year. It might have to be something that you're financially planning for, but I'm hoping that, that at some point in the future, Megan will be calling me to say, guess what we're going to do? And, we're going to take a couple of years to see if we can get ourselves elevated into that 70th percentile. Because that certainly is always an option for you. Just because we're establishing you at the 60th today does not mean that you don't, that you have to stay at the 60th forever, especially if you come up with a financial plan, if you don't feel like that is something that you can take on this upcoming budget year.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of strategies.
Yep.
If market says that COLA is only 2% and we can swing 3, we can do a 1% across all bands.
Correct.
And plus the COLA.
And that would be what we would recommend that you
Which is
do.
why
Yes.
You never adjust a person's pay, you always adjust the band.
I could not agree more. Applaud.
I told you, we just went through this in my company. So it's,
Applaud. That's what we will recommend. If you decide that you do want to pursue the 70th percentile, my recommendation then to the city would be to add a couple percentage points each year in addition to the COLA to get yourselves into that 70th percentile. It might take you a couple budget cycles to make that happen, but that's an option.
One tiny little silver lining is we have a $125,000 margin between the 398 and the 272 that we can roll over into the 26 budget towards our goal.
Right.
So there's 125 we don't have to
Come up with.
find or come up with or cut.
right.
Yeah.
Now, you may have mentioned it, and I may have just missed it, but do we have an idea, the 60th versus the 70th, the effect it'll have on turnover?
Well, I can't promise that they're going to come if we put you at the 70th percentile, but what I can tell you is that you will be, we do know that your percentages, or that your pay bands will, they will up by
They will
a pretty
increase.
good percentage. And, will that make a difference? I certainly hope so. And, I think one of the things that might happen is that your departments are going to be able to hire them at a lower step, and the employees will be able to see the progression over the course of many years. Because one of the things that we see right now is that you've got a lot of people that are creeping the top of their ranges, and they don't really have a lot of future growth. And the 70th percentile will be able to afford you that opportunity, and it's going to poise you more competitively. I mean, it's a 30-minute drive to me to get to the airport. Okay, it's a 30-minute drive or less to Wichita, which is a large market, but their wages are higher. And as you head down the highway, as you get to those communities, you know that they're paying more and more and more. We can see that off of the bands. The closer you are to Wichita, the more that you're paying, and it's really simply going to competitively place you in the future.
Megan, we've got that chart on 17 of the resignations, and we talked about those early resignations. I'm just curious, do we have a finger on the pulse of, is that job incompatibility? Is that culture incompatibility? I mean, we have worked so hard as an organization on our culture, and I think, I think they'd rather walk away than get fired if they saw the writing on the wall. And I'm wondering how much of that is in that resignation column that probably would be in the other
That's
for,
a really
for
good-
discharge.
That's a really good question. In the last year, we've started doing exit interviews. And so we are capturing a lot more data on why people are leaving, and we're able to capture a little bit more of the trends that are happening with employees leading up to when they are leaving, and why, whether it be, okay, the writing's on the wall, and so I'm gonna go ahead and bow out before somebody says it's time for you to go.
Encouraged to seek opportunities elsewhere.
Yep. So we are capturing quite a bit more data with those exit interviews and those exit surveys
Right.
now.
So I have a question. You just started doing exit interviews, or have they not always been done?
They've been done for several years.
Okay.
I think they may have changed them to capture more data.
Is there any way we would ever, let's say nobody ever left and everybody got just as efficient as they possibly could get? I mean, that's stretching the scenario quite a bit, but I'm talking about the cost of turnover. If you've got 5 people that have worked for 20 years and they become super efficient, do we ever need just 4 instead of 5 because there's no training involved? They all know what to do. Is that any part of this scenario? If we could keep people longer, do we need as many people?
If you're growing, I would say you need as
Yeah.
many people because you just got more work.
Right,
Work
right.
doesn't ever stay the same.
So then are you telling us we need to put the brakes on the economic development? and
No,
Stop
no,
these
no.
companies from coming in? That'll solve our problems.
Rod, I have
I'm talking about the same work, I'm
Yeah.
assuming.
similar
that-
work.
that- yeah,
I would say it depends. You like that answer?
yeah.
Because we have departments where, depending on the income, the person who comes in, and depending on the work and the reassessment of that position, sometimes we don't need someone as qualified, or sometimes we don't.
Yeah.
They're not doing the same thing. So we're definitely doing that because we can't just hire and replace someone who's been in their position for 10 or 12 years and not look at the position, because things have totally changed. I mean, things are changing yearly.
Yeah.
That being said, what I am seeing is what my 20-year employees or my 40 plus are doing, and this is a generalization. They're holding, they're juggling a lot of balls that necessarily our 20-year-olds aren't wanting to do. They want flexibility. They want to more philosophical, more, let me tell you how I feel. Let me tell you what I think about this position. They want to be part of that democratic process. They're not necessarily wanting to come in at 6 a.m. and leave at 6 p.m.
Yeah.
And that, a perfect example is in an organization I was at, my job required 12, 15-hour days, and I continued to request for more help and more help. And when I left, they replaced that position with a person and a half. And I'm finding that here, that people who have just been here and are efficient are having to replace with more.
Yeah.
But not all the time. We're seeing also that when someone does leave, it's an opportunity for us to say, oh, let's change that up. We don't have to do that anymore. I think that's effective and efficient governance, and that's what we're taught to do. All the department heads are doing that because we know we have limited resources. We know, if I have $50,000 and I need to make this work, what's the best way to make it work? So I want to assure you that we're not just replacing with more because, we were here and now we have to be here, so we just keep adding.
Right.
This is why we're doing this PACE study. It's an assessment. So to answer your question, I think it depends, and we assess very carefully.
It's hard to calculate the
Yeah,
cost of
yeah, it is.
turnover, I mean,
I think our police and
is.
fire department could assign a number to it because there is
Yeah.
a more defined number to replacing a police officer or a fireman because of all the training and
Yeah.
that goes into it. I don't know, Chief, do you have a number? Like, you probably have a number in the back of your head. Steve? Yep. That would be-
Extra on top of their
Oh, yeah.
salary.
yeah.
And that may not include the overtime that you are suffering by the vacancy as well, because it's a plus overtime and payouts.
Yeah.
I want to talk about a couple of the other topics that are in the body of the report, and that is some guiding recommendations on how to manage the system going forward. You've put some financial resources into updating the system, whether we're going to use the 60th or the 70th. We've got to manage that system, and we do recommend that you rely on an economic indicator on an annual basis. We've done this now here for you for the first year, and then after that, we want you to pick your economic indicator. It can be the CPI. It can also be simply contacting your comparators and understanding what they are doing for a cost of living, and you do a calculation of that. CPI, we don't often see people do year for year. We will find that some of them will take like a 3-year average or a 5-year average just to try to get it to level out a little bit more, just simply because, the 8% of the world, when they hit, they really, they do big on the bottom dollar. And we just want you to be consistent with that. Whatever mechanism you pick, just please be consistent and use that same indicator at the same time each year. That will allow you then to make your salary schedule adjustments. So those ranges, the goal then is, what do you need to do to be able to retain the 60th percentile? That's the goal. And that cost of living then will help you do that, along with then the employees will still qualify for their in-range adjustments. Certainly that's going to be at least annually. In some cases, it may be more often than that if they're new and you're going to give them a 6-month increase. We don't want it to be based on the certifications. Let the certifications be its own separate process. And then we do recommend that you do a market update about every 3 to 5 years. And your metrics, your turnover, your vacancy rates, time to hire, all of that is going to help HR and your administration decide, is it time for us to go back out to the market and look and see how are we doing against that 60th or that 70th percentile. I will say that the closer you are to metro areas, the more often you're going to want to do it. If you were in maybe a little bit more if you were a little bit more rural, I might say we might be able to wait 4 or 5 years. So that's why I'm saying, let's talk about 3 to 5. And if you don't need it, don't call. But market updates are typically a lot faster. We just look at your same comparators and how much do you need to adjust your model to be able to get back into the 60th percentile. The other part of this is the back end of the report is total rewards, because what we've talked about up to this point is the compensation, and we know that the total employee experience goes beyond compensation. It is the #1 reason why employees are leaving right now, generally nationwide on recent surveys that they've been conducting in the HR world, and that is new because usually compensation has been ranked about 4, but right now compensation is ranking 1 or 2. So we like to look at from a total rewards perspective. It's not only the compensation, but it's the benefits, it's the well-being. How are you taking care of your employees? programs, the professional development, what opportunities do your employees have to be able to grow professionally in their trade or industry. And then it's also the recognition for the job well done that they do. And I know that that's very important to the organization. You have longevity. I would recommend you keep longevity, just maybe make it a little bit more robust. But this makes up the total employee experience. We did an inventory of everything that the city is doing. It's in the body of the report. I encourage you to take a look at those pages because it's sometimes interesting that employees are, absolutely focused on the wages. No doubt about that. But don't forget that we have a lot more to offer you as an organization for us to be an employer of choice. And that starts on page 27 and it runs to the top part of page 29. And that is everything that is available to your employees. And so you've done a really good job in making sure that all of those areas are taken care of for your employees. With that in mind, we did take a look at some additional benefit opportunities for the city. These are not immediate recommendations. We know that benefits might take a little bit more time for you to assess whether or not this is going to work for your organization or not. You might even need to get your insurance broker involved, things of that nature, but there are some opportunities. And the first one that we have is to add a floating holiday. Your comparables do have some other holidays that maybe you're not celebrating, and there are others that may be celebrated that are just not necessarily on the list, but you have employees that they wish to celebrate that personally, and that gives them the opportunity to do that and be able to just encompass that globally. The other thing might be a little bit more, there might be some opinions about this, and you have a wellness pay program where if your employees are not coming in sick, they get paid some sick time. Well, what that does is it presents what's called presenteeism. People come to work when they're sick and they really shouldn't be here. And so that is it's a program that, not everyone necessarily always buys into or follows. And I think that is a program because it's ripe for some presenteeism, which is, you don't want that either. You want people to be able to take their time off. Should you incent your employees, or not incent your employees, but I think it's kind of use those dollars in a different manner. That money could be very well directed into enhancing your longevity program, because at least the longevity program is equitable and all employees that are here a certain number of years will qualify for that, versus individuals that where it's tied to their sick time. If they're sick, let them be sick and let them be home. It's okay. The other thing is paid time off. Daniela just talked a few minutes ago about the change in generation, and that is absolutely true. The new generation, the new workforce that's coming in, there are a couple of things that are really important to them. They want the individuality. They want to be able to make decisions that are, specific to them, and they want work-life balance. They don't want to work the amount of overtime that maybe some of us that have been, we've been in government for, 3 decades or better, we thrive on working those endless hours, but the next generation coming in, they don't thrive on that. They thrive on the time off and the balance of that time off. Sick and vacation is sometimes viewed as archaic. And the new generation that's coming in, they don't really even truly understand it. One of the things that you could consider is what we call a paid time off program. PTO is you take all of those balances and you roll it over into one singular program. It gives you more than you get for vacation, a little bit less than you would get for sick and vacation combined, knowing then, that your payouts and whatnot, all have to be considered. But it is basically one pot for the employees versus having a set of rules for the sick time and having a separate set of rules for the vacation time. Offers a little bit more flexibility to your new workforce coming in. Now, usually PTO transitions can be difficult because you've got employees that have a large balance of time. We successfully can navigate that. There are options available for extended leave banks to be able to roll over those, what they have accumulated, so that employees don't lose the time that they have already vested. There are also what I call future opportunities, and they're going to be in the far back of the report. And it's a future date. Take a look at it. It might work for you, it might not. And what we're looking at is there just anything else that you can do to help sweeten the pot for your employees? We do have alternative payout programs so that it's not in the form of cash, but can be tax deferred or tax free and used towards retirement. Sometimes this is really nice when employees, they say, I really want to retire, but I can't afford my health insurance. Well, if their payout would go into a medical trust, those dollars can then be used tax-free for insurance premiums. So there's a couple of options that are out there for you. We are starting to see additional retirement contributions or matches above and beyond your CAPERS or your KPNF. And this is like a 457 contribution match. We're not seeing it, it's not pervasive, I will say, but we're starting to see it pop up, and it is popping up in the state of Kansas. So that is something that you're going to want to pay attention to with your comparators if you need to introduce a new match. Tuition reimbursement is important for professional development for your employees. Elder care leave is also important. You've got the parental leave, but you know what? You do have some older workers, and they might have aging parents that need some time off as well. So that gives them some flexibility as well. Long-term insurance, long-term care insurance. Again, you do have some aging employees, and is anyone thinking about what happens if I need to go into a long-term care facility? Usually it's the individuals who've experienced this with a parent that understand the value of it, and it certainly can be financially very devastating for employees, and this helps them with their financial planning. And there's some other options as well. Lifestyle savings accounts are you can do that with wellness programs, that type of thing. So there's a couple of other opportunities in the back. Last but not least, you are going to see some other future, very, very future opportunities, just some little nuggets for you to be thinking about here, and that is your succession planning and professional development. You do have a couple of departments that when I talked with them and they said, yeah, I'm not too far out from retirement, and we don't necessarily have a succession plan in place, to make sure that the departments really are putting some focus on that, because when we don't want to lose a person, but when we do, you need to make sure that you have your backup plan so that your operations, they just continue seamlessly and that you're not impacted as an organization. I do know that your administration plans on addressing this, and I hope that the commission will fully support your city manager in that effort. The last thing that is that human resources is a strategic business partner, and I'm very pleased to see that your HR director is here in the meeting this evening, and she's a wonderful resource. This office is a resource, and that's what they're there to do. Human resources is available to departments to be able to navigate the problems and help us come up with a meaningful solution that is objective and defendable and lawful and works within the policies of the city. So don't forget, you have a great resource available to you. With that, good conversation. What else can I answer for you?
Well, part of our compensation package to you is that you help us find a way to come up with the missing money for our budget, and we'll give you a bonus.
I've got these seeds for the money tree, but I left them in Wisconsin. So, yeah, I know. This is a difficult one, and you are in a very difficult position, because I think that you can see that you might have a need for the 70th percentile. You might have a need for that. And we certainly want you to be there too, but I also, as your consultant, I want everyone to be eyes wide open to that, because I'm not only thinking about, or we have to not only think about the first year cost, we have to think about the long-term sustainable cost, and that then becomes, that then really becomes a big policy item for the 5 of you.
Well, this is very important work.
It is.
I know that.
Yeah.
Because we do want the best of the best here.
Right.
Well, I'm just looking forward to how we're going to incorporate all of this into our still-to-come budget sessions.
Yes. So to that, we have a budget work session in 2 weeks. And so no decision required tonight, but we would like some direction on what additional data we could provide, information to help you make a better informed decision. I know that we just receive our assessed valuation numbers, and I know that plays a big part. Other than the request from Mayor Stinnett as far as the vacant budget dollars, we could do a point in time, we could do it today, and then maybe a point in time in 2024 and a point in time in 2023. That might give a little bit of context as to how much money we could set aside for something like this. I just had a thought. Of those 8 positions, I'm confident that a good portion or half, I don't know if Ed's in the room, are our water or wastewater department. And so today, I don't know that we could say we wouldn't fund those positions because they're all in one bucket. But over a period of time, that might definitely could be considered. So we could obtain that information. What else do you need from us?
I think for me, my questions are going to come when I see a bigger picture, when we are able to look at the revenues, we are able, because we've had 2 years where we've had increases in valuations. And so I'm thinking of our public and just how we balance this.
Right, that's the other half of it. I
yes.
mean, not only has our employees seen costs go up and everything, but so has the community that funds the mills that fund the city.
Yeah.
You know, it's for later, but I wrote it down. What can you get me what we spend on the wellness pay program?
I might have those right here, if I can dig them out. Just give me a second. The wellness is, I think it's around, it was around $80,000 in '24.
I have a question, what part of the incentives that we give these established companies that are coming in play a part in the budget that would allow us to get to that 70%?
The foregone revenue, like, for example, like the tax abatements or actual payout?
I'm talking about the property taxes.
Property
the
taxes.
incentives that we give
Tax
to
abatement.
companies. Like what part of that, or does that even play into our budget for this?
Yeah, that probably has multiple parts. I would say like at today, dollars per dollars, I mean, you could say, yeah, we're foregoing this revenue, which won't allow us to pay these employees. But if you look at the bigger picture, that company may not have come to our community in 10 years from now or 5 years from now. We may not be capturing that property tax, which in turn, 5 years from now, we will be able to give our employees that if that's where you allocated your dollars. So that's also a point in time question. I would say in my role, incentivizing these companies to come to the city of Newton in the way that we're doing. We have a policy in place. We have a structure in place. We see the growth. I would say that we are benefiting long-term from developing and assigning some incentives there so that as we grow, we continue to be competitive and we're able to pay our employees, keep up with that competitive rate. Today, if you just asked me today, I would say, well, no, because we're foregoing that revenue today. But if you think long-term,
Right.
which is the name of the game.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying how, if that were to be, say, hypothetically, like reduced to a certain degree, would that be helpful in helping us achieve that 70%?
It
In
could.
a more reasonable time frame?
It could, but it's not a sum zero game. So if we stifle development on an empty lot, that lot may not ever get developed, so we never actually get the extra revenue that we
Okay.
were banking on. So it's a balancing act.
Okay,
So,
You don't have it
That's
right
what
now anyway.
right.
I needed to understand.
So
What you hope is your commercial and residential development that's kicked up. It'll be interesting to see how much new valuation was put on and what effect it had on our tax revenue. You just pray that comes at some type of a level that the real cost of the project is the infrastructure. Because we still have to pave Hillside, and as part of the investment into that, there's still money that we have to spend, but hopefully we'll get enough revenue off the commercial and residential development to offset what we spend on the infrastructure.
The problem is we don't get that revenue till down the road.
The big tax
And meanwhile,
revenue.
this is
Yeah.
upfront cost that we have to.
Same problem
suffer
every
pain.
community has when
Yeah.
they,
And the other way that, your 10-year tax abatement or 8-year, whatever it is, the other way that I always look at it is there's a vacant piece of property here. You're only getting X amount of tax dollars.
Yeah.
And you don't get that additional until somebody does build there.
Yeah.
Then you get the additional, and that's it.
Right.
So it really behooves us. We hear this, I know there are some citizens who don't like any kind of incentives. They don't like it. However,
Yeah.
every other community, you can't say 100%, but most other communities our size are doing it. And if we don't do that, guess what? We get bypassed. Those site selectors, they just go on down the road.
No,
We're not even in consideration then.
right. I'm not opposed to incentives at all, really, just maybe the amount we give sometimes with some companies, but, yeah, I just kind of wanted to know how that
Yeah, also something
tied
to
into that.
something to keep in mind, salaries come from property tax or ad valorem tax. They come from our utilities, so fees, fee for services. They come from our sales tax. They come from our CVB fund. They come from, it's a mix. So it's not just property taxes. We have quite a mix. And also another thing to keep in mind is that when you're thinking of development, or specifically commercial or industrial development, I think industrial too, I don't know if Zach is here. When someone builds a house, that valuation comes back at 11.5%. On a commercial property, that's 25, up to 30%. So we get bigger bang for our buck by incentivizing that bigger development, because that in turn that investment is key for keeping our community growing and continuing to pay our employees competitively, because 60% is competitive. 70% is more competitive, but keeping even at the 60, we have to continue to grow. So I just wanted to throw that.
And just as a reminder, and you guys all just remembered this, we spent a lot of work sessions on it, but you did very carefully look through your economic development policy to ensure that there were good cost ROI calculations embedded in there, so that you knew that each one of those was an investment in the community and that it would pay dividends. So you've already done all the hard work on that, and you'll just be waiting to see those returns now come back.
I guess my challenge to Donna and the department heads is help us close that gap. How do we find it? You know?
I can bring to you the general fund and how we'll look if either way we go. I've done work on that,
Yeah.
so you can see that.
That's good.
I will tell you the assessed valuation came in at 4.95% higher, which is about $8,000 on a mill.
how much of that was new? Do you have any idea?
I don't have it in front of me.
They'll tell you at some point.
4.9%. Okay.
That doesn't surprise me. I think
It-
they've settled down.
It's about back to normal.
Yeah.
Yeah, another 12% would have been hard to swallow.
Oh,
Or
all the way
11%, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was 12% last year.
Man.
10 years, it might be 18 or 20% when the tax
Maybe.
abatements start rolling off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it'd be nice to know too, in the future, how many abatements are going to roll off if, and at some point in time, get that number to us.
Yeah, we've got that.
They don't ever roll off if you never give them.
We have not had a conversation with department heads to discuss what it would mean to entertain a 70%, because we did see that number. We'll be happy to have that conversation at our staff meeting next week and see, could we tighten our belt and make that work somehow, whether it means discontinuing some positions, whether it means that's a lot of money. So this would be really tightening our belt, and maybe that is what our department head is. Maybe that's what they want. Maybe that 70% would put them in a better spot, and knowing that there might be a little bit of sacrifice by a decreased staff, that's the route we want to go. Or maybe they say 60% is okay, let's keep our staff and let's keep moving forward on increasing our budget so that we can train and we can do all the things that we need to do to stay in line with our market. As long as we are looking at those extra benefits, if paying for, $1,000 stipend or $2,000 for college, then we do that. Or increasing that longevity pay to really show our long-term employees, hey, we value you, we want you to stick around, this is what we're going to do for longevity pay. Maybe that's what they prefer. So we will be happy to have that conversation next week.
It's probably in here. When do you guys allow new hires to start using their vacation?
After 3 months.
Okay. So you've already done it. Because there's a lot of strategies that we've all had to take out of the magic bag this last 5 years and not making them wait 6 or 12 months and even extending prorated holidays to part-timers. All those strategies are life-work balance that is attractive. So.
One of the other things for non-exempt hourly employees, they can use comp time, and that is available right away too. So if they can, in lieu of overtime, they can put those hours into a comp time pool and then use those right away instead of waiting 3 months.
I think that's a testament to why we only have 8 openings. I mean, do a lot of good. I mean, we can always find fault, but remember.
I don't know what our, insurance policies, how much we pay per employee.
Yeah.
For
We
health
have
insurance.
a really good insurance.
Huh?
We have a very good insurance. I brought our benefits guide.
It is in the report as well.
Yeah, it is in the report.
Elena, you want to touch on that real quick?
I certainly can. I'm happy to. Your health insurance starts on page 29, but the graphs and whatnot will start on page 30. So what we've done is highlighted, because you have 4 different plans, we've highlighted how you are doing against the market. Tables 7 and 8 will look at single and family, and we're looking at just how much the premium is in comparisons to the other premiums that are charged by other organizations. Your high deductible health plan is among the top of the market. Now your, and then in order it goes option C, B, and A. Your A plan is somewhere about the middle of the market. And your family is much the same, where you're in the top part of the market. The next analysis that we do is tables 9 and 10. And what we do is we look at what the expected employee cost is. So we'll take a look at not only your premium, but also the deductible that employees would typically have to expend if they had any kind of medical, and we will we offset that amount by if you are offering any kind of an HSA or an HRA contribution. And again, you can see that your PPO plans are, they're really high in the market. They're doing very well. Your high deductible health plan, not doing so good. And I know that you recently discontinued your HSA. I do think that there's some opportunity there for you, because if that is the plan that is less expensive per belly button on the plan, there might be some strategy. There might be some strategy in that.
We don't even have that right now?
Pardon me?
Option? the HSA?
Well, I think you have the HSA, but there's not an employer contribution to the.
Okay, so there's not a match.
Right,
for
right,
anything,
exactly.
It's just what the employee puts
Yep,
in.
exactly.
That's where I was going with the health and premiums and stuff. And like, is that included? I think that there would be a benefit to employees to be able to match a certain percentage of that.
We
to
also
help
have
us
not-
kind of come up in that competitive range, more competitive range.
We also have not raised the premiums we charge the employees for like 8 or 9 years.
Those premiums are
Okay.
awesome.
They're awesome.
Yeah, I know. I would agree. Yeah.
So we pay most of it.
Well, I wouldn't kill for those.
Thank you, Donna.
Take that off the record.
So
We did raise them.
your plan, your health plan, and then we also look at it from maximum. If someone had a catastrophic event and they hit the out-of-pocket maximum, how do you fare? And actually, the city is faring very competitively in that arena. So overall, with the exception of I could see the opportunity there for that high deductible health plan having an HSA. Your plans are good for the employees if they experience a claim, and that's really what we care. That's what we look at. If your employer's going to be in a financial hardship, and this tells me that you're doing okay. You're doing okay as an employer. You're doing good.
Good,
Kudos.
good to know.
Good kudos.
Employee contributions are pretty good.
Aren't they?
I talk to people nearly every day who tell me that their insurance premiums are running them anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000 a month. So
Yes.
this is priceless.
Dun, dun, dun. That's a lot.
Yeah, that is a lot. Well, from now until our budget work session, which it's in 2 weeks. Yeah.
The 24th.
The 24th. 24th, 5 o'clock, we have a budget work session. If there's anything you need to help you make this decision, other than the items that were requested, which is a bigger picture, which I believe you will get at the next work session, we'll try to bring in the budget savings at a point in time.
Is there no room or no way to meet those two recommendations of 60 and 70, like in between there somehow? Like, is that,
There's always an option. Yep.
okay?
Get out your checkbook,
Got my checkbook?
cut down that check.
There's not much there right now.
Well, you usually go out on your spreadsheet 4 or 5 years, don't you?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll need to see
Because what I don't want to think about, and it's kind of parked back there in the back.
777 is what 27 looks like if you do a 3% COLA.
Okay, well, I'm thinking of, when I think of the big picture, I just don't, when we start fitting this in, how we are going to fit it in, I just don't want there to be, we're doing good for the next year or two, then all of a sudden, whoa, an 8 mil increase. We might as well pack our bags and catch the train, because people were.
Maybe it'll be here by then, we can go south.
You can
Well-
get to Oklahoma City, you ain't going no further than that.
Well, that's what I'm looking at, is how we put this in and how we,
Sustainable.
yes.
We don't want to do 70 and then find out we shouldn't have.
Can afford it.
Yeah.
I will remind you, it took us about 3 years to get up to where we are. So, and it was a good plan because half of us are at 60%. We just need to bring up the other half.
Yeah.
But it did take that long to get where we are now.
So they've said for years that they want to implement a mandatory minimum wage of $15 an hour. How would that blow up your lower band?
And how much do we
Because
think?
it's going to not blow them up, but it's also going to compress the others.
So, I think we're going to be, we're probably going to be pretty close, because there's a couple pay grades at the very, very top that aren't drastically filled. And when we deal with states that do have that minimum wage, what we try to do is put a little bit of buffer in there where, yep, we have to meet the $15, and those are going to be, some of your most entry-level positions, and then create a spread of separation so that as your minimum wage increases, that doesn't necessarily mean that the rest of the model has to increase, and you can kind of slowly chip away at that separation that we've given you. I have a number of clients in the state of Illinois, and they are dealing with a $15 minimum wage. It's kind of killing the communities, not going to lie. They're struggling financially because of it. And it's been, with one particular client, it's been about 5 years, and we put enough buffer in for them to be able to, hoping that that would sustain them for the upcoming 5 years. We just did a market update. We redid it again, but that buffer lasted them 5 years. So we just have to be a little bit strategic with maybe a little bit of redesign if that were to happen in the state.
No cost, right?
Can't, well,
You don't get what you don't have.
right, seeds.
You ready? That it, Commissioner?
I think we have our work cut out for us.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, nice job.
Thank you.